Unscripted, I asked the kids, how do you feel when mommy and daddy are on their phones? I'll put Waipuna first.
When you're on your phone, it feels like I can't play with you.
Beautification of communication, the Communification Podcast.
Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the first season of the Communification Podcast, Communication and Technology. This is episode 5, and you'll get to know two of my besties. I know you're going to love them as much as I do. But first, the way the podcast works is first we learn from a communication expert and researcher, and then I have guests on the pod to break it down, reflect, share, and apply those research-based strategies to our own lives. So in episode 4, Dr. Soo-Yun Shin gave us some communication tips in the area of parental phubbing. I'll be referencing that throughout today's episode, so if you want to take a listen before diving in with us today, please feel free to hop back to episode 4, but it's also not essential. You'll still be able to enjoy and learn a little something from today's chat. We don't go over everything that we learned in episode 4, but we do a pretty good job of wading through that information and trying to make sense of it all. This episode was also a part of my pilot that I presented to my thesis committee in the Department of Communicology at UH Manoa, which is the scientific study of human communication. It was recorded in March of 2021, but I reworked and repurposed it for your listening and viewing pleasure. As usual, this podcast is available free of charge, and one way to help this podcast thrive is to share it with one friend. If you could do that for me, I would be so thankful. And don't forget, your engagement equals entries into my monthly roving giveaways. Details in the show notes at malikadudley.com. I'll throw a link in the caption too. Today's show is centered on a communication issue called phubbing. Let's have Dr. Shin from episode 4 define that for us.
So phubbing, it's a combination of two words, phone plus snubbing. It's basically that people get distracted with their phone while they are talking or in close proximity with someone else. So it's like other people feel like they are being ignored or being snubbed by another person's phone using. Basically, the person who's snubbing by using their phone while they are talking with someone else is the phubber. And then the person who's being ignored in that incident is the phubbie. That's how we define two people in that problematic situation.
What an interesting term, right? And boy, did it bring up some stuff for all three of us. This conversation with two of my besties was so good. I'm so thankful to have these two in my life. Let's introduce you to them. So Elizabeth Sage is currently an experienced design strategist at Merit's Global Events. She is one of my oldest friends. We met in Hilo when I was just 3 years old. She has 2 daughters. And in her free time, you can find her in the Think Tank Happy Hour on CLUBHOUSE discussing human connection in the experience economy. Kaimana Brummel is currently the Director of Advancement at Seabury Hall. She was part of the first class of Keiki at Punanaleo o Maui Hawaiian Language Immersion School. Hawaiian language and culture have guided Kaimana throughout her life. She's a mama of 2 and lives right down the street from me. We love to go on social distance walks to catch up, but it was also just so fun to do something a little different today.
Hi, ladies.
Hi there.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, the struggle is real. And that was a lot of information. So I thought we'd just dive right in. Maybe Liz, you can go first, and then Kaimana, you can chime in, and we'll just take it from there.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot to digest in that. Recognized a lot of my own habits in some of what she was talking about, of course. Also felt like I was kind of on the right track based on some of those takeaways and things that we can work on as we're trying not to do some parental phubbing with our children. But I really appreciated all the tips she had. And to be perfectly honest, it made me feel less alone as a parent. It made me feel maybe a little bit less guilty that I'm not the only parent that is doing this. And the struggle, as you said, is real. And all of us are out there struggling right now.
Yeah, I really appreciated having a word to this experience. So like just the vocabulary of parental phubbing, I really appreciated being able now to have a word around that. I could probably do another podcast on like spousal phubbing or, colleague phubbing. But I think, as trying to be a more conscious parent, looking at my behavior and seeing it in so many other people, or knowing that other people are going through it, like Liz said, was very comforting. And I really appreciate at the end that Dr. Shin was giving suggestions in a non-judgmental way.
I appreciated that as well. I think we can maybe dive right into our struggles. So I'm not going to go first. I actually have my children recorded and it's pretty damning. So why don't we start with one of you who wants to go first? Tell us the struggle. What is it that you struggle with and why with parental phubbing?
I don't mind taking that first. So especially the last year, I am an extroverted extrovert. I fill my bucket by connecting with people, and that has been stripped away from me and all of us really, right, for the last year. And so I have really relied on my social media, my texting, my Marco Polo video messages, Snapchat, whatever I can to connect with my friends, with a community, to just, fill that extrovert bucket. So as a result, I'm definitely on my phone more, especially in front of my children, as they're all home with me at this time. I have two elementary school aged girls, ages 7 and 9, and they see me just kind of phone in my face all the time. Additionally, all of my recipes, I like to cook a lot. All of my recipes are pretty much on my phone. And so I even have my phone up to just do basic tasks like that constantly. And it really is a challenge to kind of explain to my children and differentiate what I'm doing on my phone at any given time, because all they see is this thing in front of my face or in my hand. And there are definitely moments where my kids will tell me, Mom, just put your phone down, and I listen. I mean, kids are really the best mirror, right, to who we are as people and what we're doing.
That's so true. And when we just ask them how they feel about it, it's so interesting what comes out of their mouths. How about you, Kaimana? What's the struggle for you?
The struggle for me was I felt like my whole family, we were kind of phubbing each other because my kids were on devices a lot, especially early in the pandemic when I needed them to be occupied so I could get some work done when I was working from home. Now that I'm working more outside of the home and they're able to go to school a little bit more, I'm okay with them being on their own devices, but I start to get really anxious when they're on it. But I realize that that's just a mirror for my own use, that I get anxious or disappointed or hard on myself when I'm always on my phone. And so I try to model the behavior, but it comes out in really unproductive ways that doesn't seem very, I don't want to say strategic, but just it's just one-offs, and I'm inconsistent, like Dr. Shin said. And so laying some more ground rules, or I hate the rule, not rules, but like parameters, or I don't know, maybe we need more rules. I'm kind of a rules person, but it was hard to hear about my own behavior. So I'll just say that, and not feel disappointed, and just know that we're all going through it and that there is a way to get better at it.
Yes, that's a really good point, that we're all not lost causes. And also, talking about the coronavirus, it is really important to recognize that we all got thrust into the situation. And just as social media and media has been ramping up over the last few years, and we're trying to navigate this, we all had to navigate through the coronavirus. So it's a really good point to talk about giving yourself grace for those times when we're just on autopilot. It just kind of happened. It just happened that now everything is on my devices, my work, my play, school, everything.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, that, wow, if this were the pandemic in 1918, how miserable would I be? I mean, I am also, have that gratitude for having this little device, this 6-inch device that can still keep me connected and in touch with the rest of the world. So there's that sort of silver lining to it as well. At least we do have that. It's just finding the balance at the end of the day.
Definitely. Yes. It's so nuanced.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe the integration. I struggle with balance, because then it feels like I'm striving for this equilibrium. But maybe if we can think about how do we integrate technology or the use of a device into our life in a healthy way that works for us and works for our kids, if we're talking about specifically phubbing our own children, which is so harsh. Yeah.
It's harsh. I love that, Kaimana. It's integration and intention, I think, are the words that are coming to mind. So it's integrating it in an intentional way, maybe shifting it. I know I'm starting to solutionize already, but shifting it into a way, right, where we can let it be a positive enhancement to our life rather than a time suck or drain.
Absolutely. I tend to think that it all starts with our values, so it's really a matter of identifying what your values are, identifying, what it is that you need to do, right? So there's those non-negotiables, whether it's work or whatever it is, maybe it's connecting, that me time. And then having discussion with the people that matter. So maybe that's first your partner or spouse or whoever it is that's in your household that's an adult, to talk through, okay, well, what do we want to use our phones for and why and when? Kind of figure out what are those rules and parameters, but also then integrate the children and have them be a part of that process. And you hear this a lot at school, right? I mean, how many of our kids have had their teachers sit them down and they all create the rules for the classroom, right? And there's research behind this that says that kids will stick to rules that they were a part of in creating. They'll stick to them better than a rule that we put upon them. And so I think that's a really important part of it too.
Yeah, I think we keep saying rules, but I really like the term. I think about bumpers. So I have this visual in my head of like when you go to a bowling alley, right? And you have the bumpers in the lane. So it still gives you a bit of a runway and some kind of back and forth room, but you're staying on track for the most part. I think that feels really comfortable for me, thinking about what I'd want to discuss with my kids, and instead of kind of laying down the hammer and saying hard and fast rules, because also, in all fairness, that means I need to follow them too. And to your point, Malika, about giving ourselves some grace and compassion, I also realistically know I would likely not be able to stick to everything 100% of the time. And I'd like to be a mother of my word as best I can. So I think it's sort of creating those bumpers that everybody can kind of play in that lane.
So much of the use of the phone, I like the bumper idea, because if we say, well, we're not going to be on our phone at all, that takes us as people who, have a job, or there's coworkers trying to get in touch with us. Like, it's also having to then draw boundaries with them. And then it's drawing down, and that can get really exhausting. And so, we're managing expectations, people's rules, all this stuff in the home, but also like we're connected to folks outside of it. So then I don't know, that feels like a lot right now. So if I could just start with in my home. So thank you, Liz. It also, I don't know, Liz, if you're a recovering perfectionist like I am, but I think, yeah. So the rules are comfortable to me because they're very clearly, you followed them or you didn't. And a perfectionist loves that, so, and so many moms can get into that mindset. So if we're able to give ourselves that windy lane a little bit, and we're going to bump, and it's okay, we're coming right back, and we're headed in the right direction, but there's no one perfect path right down the middle. It's going to zig and zag, but we're headed in the right direction. And thank you. That's such a good metaphor. I'm going to use that.
Definitely. And I love what you just said too, Kaimana, about how we have the people we're connected to outside. And it kind of sparked this thought in me. And this is also the world that our children live in. And this is the world they're growing up in. I have this conversation quite often with some of my mom friends on, do we raise our children based on the world that we knew, right? And the values that were instilled in us? Or do we adjust based on the world they live in? And I mean, really, our consensus at this point is you have to adjust to the world they're living in. So as much as we would like to limit our children's screen time and everything like that, take it away completely, I think there also may put them at a disadvantage later on, because they are living in a completely digitally connected technological world, and to not give them any access to it. And they understand that we live in that world as grown-ups as well. So it's kind of making those adjustments, which again, why I love that bumper analogy, because it's making those adjustments also based on the world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. And we definitely saw that firsthand. There's schools like a Waldorf, say, where there is no device use. That's a rule at the school. And it's one that you're expected to also have within your home. But then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, even those people who were really, doing their best. They were doing what they thought was best for their children. And it goes with the philosophy of their school, but now they actually have to use it. And so it was really interesting to see how people, we use this word so often that I start to hate it, but pivot. Everyone had to pivot. There was all these pivoting moments. And with the bumpers, you're allowed to do the pivots, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
But you're still in the agreed upon lane.
Headed in the right direction, or
Headed in the right direction.
in a direction that seems positive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At this point, any direction, right? We're just like trying to move.
Yeah,
Well, and to Liz's points too, I mean, I don't think we're moving in a direction where devices are going to be a less part of our life. So if we go back to what Dr. Shin said and modeling that behavior, we're also giving our kids the tools to be able to not phub other people or, share with them. This isn't, have you ever noticed that? I mean, how many times I've tried to get my attention from my kids and they phub me,
exactly.
and that's annoying. And then I'm like, I'm your mom. And then I'm just like, well, I do that to them. So how can I expect this to be any different? So along those lines of raising them in the world that they're going to be in, or that they're in now, it gives me anyway, more of a reason to not phub, or, so much of when I was talking to Dr. Shin was trying to be more consistent with the language that I'm using. If I had to use my phone, just set an expectation of time. Maybe I need 2 more minutes to finish this text to someone I work with. And when I'm done, my phone's going away, and trying to be specific with the time, the why, and then after this, you'll get my full attention or something like that.
Yeah. Before we get into all of the, how we tackle the strategies and everything, I did want to share with you what my children said. It's a little embarrassing, but we're all in this together, mamas. So I guess I will start with this one. This is my 5-year-old. These are not scripted. I asked the kids, how do you feel when mommy and daddy are on their phones? I'll put Waipuna first, and then you'll listen to Jackson. Jackson volunteered the information about how he'll do things differently when he's a parent.
It feels bad because I like to play games with Daddy and you, because that's my favorite thing to do. When you're on your phone, it feels like I can't play with you. It's just sometimes we're playing, but sometimes we want to play with you or Daddy, and we just feels like I'm missing out. When we want to play, if you're not wanting to play with us, it kind of feels sad. When I'm older and I have a phone, I'll just spend a limited time on it. I want to have it when I need it. When my kids ask for me, then I'll put it down if I'm ever called upon.
So yeah, that's what my kids had to say.
You are a brave woman, Malika. I would have a hard time, I think, hearing those answers. And at the same time, I think I'm going to ask them tonight, because now I'm genuinely curious and want to hear what they think about it.
Kaimana, anything?
I was trying not to I was tearing up a little bit with Waipuna, because it just,
Her little voice.
Yeah. And they are always watching us, and we want to be such good parents. And then I don't know, so many different hats, so many different roles. And I so want more boundaries again, just feeling like those are firm and comforting and there's clear, but it's just not the world we live in, pandemic or not, and that's very helpful. I think about how much connection, Liz, when you were saying I'm a extroverted extrovert, I'm like, oh my gosh, me too. And having more tools to be able to do that is so exciting as an introvert, but trying to figure out how the consequences of all of that, we're still going through that. I'm sure the research is showing it's ever changing, and just to live it in real time and have grace and it just, I don't know, I vacillate so much between feeling so good about being connected and then wanting to be a hermit.
I think so much of what you're saying, Kaimana, what resonates for me is that I feel like you said, we're trying so hard to just kind of be the perfect parents. And ultimately, and we have to accept this as parents, no matter what we do, we will probably screw our kids up some way, right? I mean, there's literally, we could be what we are considering to be the perfect person and never phub them or never, give them all the time and attention they want. And they'll still end up on a therapist's couch in 20 years talking about how we ruined their life. I mean, I feel like there's no way around that. But going back to kind of what you said, Malika, earlier about the values, I think maybe from a phubbing perspective, and I will say some of Dr. Shin's stats were rather daunting, right? And those, especially talking about, I think it was like 30% of adolescents have more depressive tendencies when their parents are on their phone all the time. That to me is to prioritize, right? Like how I want to show up as a parent. So really putting more energy into avoiding those behaviors that can enhance the depressiveness and the anxiety is more important in the long run. I think if I'm trying to weigh out what are the things I can do, what are the levers I can pull to screw up my kids as least as possible, as little as possible.
Well, that's what's great about the strategy that she presented, which was shared expectations. Mm-hmm. It was open-ended, so your shared expectation can be a shared expectation to phub each other.
Right.
If that's okay, you talk about it and you're like, this is the time when we can all be on our devices and everyone's all right with it. No one feels slighted. No one feels like, what were some of the things she was saying? Like children sometimes have lower self-evaluation because they're being phubbed by their parents and they start to feel less worthy of their attention. But if you just set that expectation, ahead of time, then it totally helps. And that is so comforting to me. So I've tried it and with Waipuna and Jackson, and I'll say, do you know what, mommy? So this morning there was actually a tsunami watch and I had to, it was basically all hands on deck and I was doing updates around the clock for 3 hours. And I just had to explain it to her. Hey, honey, I'm so sorry. Mommy can't play with you right now, but I'm a meteorologist. I explained what that was to her, what I had to do and why I was doing it. I'm trying to keep people safe. And what's so interesting is I've done this before. And every now and then when I pick up my phone, Vai will actually say, oh, mommy, you're keeping people safe. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's connecting with her, right? She's understanding your role in the world and why your phone or the media in front of you is an integral part of that. So that's great.
I did want to share this with you though, too, as we move into the other strategy of parental modeling, because she also said this after I asked her, what will you do when you are a parent?
When I know that I'm going to do the same thing as my mommy and daddy.
Profound.
Wow.
Very telling.
Also, the opposite of what Jackson said with being on the phone. I mean, I'm wondering if there is a group of folks that are our kids' age that will grow up and be like, I hated the way that made me feel. I'm never going to do it. And I genuinely, they won't do it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that makes sense?
I'm seeing that already. I work at a high school and I already see high school kids opting out of social media, which I think is different than a device, but there are some parallels between them really actively not trying to build a digital footprint, trying to live a really anonymous, like digitally low-key life because of a number of reasons. One is being able to better control how they're presented online and not wanting to do that yet. And a lot of them have a lot of different reasons. It's a very, very small amount of the kids that I work with. A lot of them, I mean, I had lunch today with a girl who wants to be a marketing intern. And so we talked about it, but basically she just wants to make pretty social media posts for brands that she loves, which is fine. Like we talked about that, but I was like, you have to understand, like, marketing is this huge thing and you want to do this small part. So I think that there's this understanding that they're still growing, in adolescence and stuff, but I think you're onto something, Liz. I think, and it's already starting to happen based on the lived experience that we're on. And I'm like you, I'm an older millennial. I have been on Facebook since pretty much day one. I went to an East Coast college and was one of the first few thousand people on it, and have probably been on it every day for 15 years. And that is horrifying. But at the same time, it's done so much good. And I struggle every day to have boundaries around that, just that time and then my device time.
But exactly what you're saying, Kaimana, I think it's this course correction, right? And there, the benefit that our children have are the data points that we didn't have when we joined Facebook or any of these social platforms. So we hear all this stuff about sharing data, and I mean, we hear it now, but that wasn't even a thing back when we joined it. And so our kids are growing up and they understand the impact it has on them. And that actually gave me chills to hear you say that. Some of the high school students are already opting out of social media, even if it is a small percentage. That could be the very beginning of a movement, right? If you think about the bell curve model. But yeah, I think they're equipped with, knowledge that we didn't have growing up.
We did not have that knowledge. We are the generation that learned about this as it happened. I mean, we went from the landline phone to the giant cell phone to the small, then we had the tiny little cell phone. Mm-hmm. You wanted the smallest cell phone you could have, and you were connected to MySpace on your computer. And now, so we've been going through this without really any checks and balances. We're just winging it. But you're right. The children or our children, I should say, so the next generation, they have more guidelines and more parameters, and they know so much more because of that. But we might, I don't know, be living in like a fantasy world because we really didn't have that. And so now as parents, we're having to come to terms with this, with how we use media and why, and the impacts that it could have. And we can't get down on ourselves because we didn't know this stuff. We did not know. Research was not studying this. 15 years ago, when I was in my master's program, which studies human communication, we did not study this. Even though people were on MySpace and Facebook, it wasn't yet legitimate. It wasn't a legitimate area to do that type of research. And now it is, because of how society has changed and how much technology has changed, just tech alone. So, we got to give ourselves that grace too, but it's so great to have those strategies. Why don't you both tell me some of the tangible strategies that you will be enacting because of hearing this podcast?
So I will go with a few of mine. So some of what Dr. Shin was saying, the boundaries, the open conversations. So I've started in the last couple of months, I've started kind of equating, if I'm on my phone or sending a text and one of my children walks up to me and tries to have a conversation, to me, it's oddly similar to if I'm having a conversation with one of you in real life and a child comes up to interrupt you and you say, one moment, let mommy finish talking or whatever it is I'm doing, and then I'll pay attention to you. And so I actually do that with my phone. So if I'm looking at my phone legitimately, if I'm just, mindless scrolling, I am saying on record, I am going to make a more conscious effort to put it down. But if I am actually sending a text or in the middle of some sort of communication, I will tell my children, and I've been doing this for a few months now, saying, hold on a second, I'm just sending this text to, like you said, Kaimana, explaining the why, right? Oh, I'm just sending this text to so-and-so about XYZ. Give me a minute and then I'll pay attention to you. And I think a big part of that is the follow through though, because sometimes, especially on our device, it's easy to get distracted and just click on the next app and the next app and the next app. So it's really staying true to your word and showing up with integrity with your children. And so for me personally, I'm definitely going to make a really intentional effort to do that after listening to Dr. Shin. And then also just from a personal perspective, setting limits on my certain apps that tend to suck me in. I currently have a 15-minute limit on Instagram every day, and I hit it every day. And 15:15, that goes real quick. And then I will sometimes add time to it, but it makes it easier to then just put my phone down when I need to be present with my kids during dinner. Those really key hours, I think, from after school till bedtime, which are the witching hours and the most difficult time to fill. But that is, I think, also the most important, right? And that is really the most kind of beneficial family time you have. So those are some of the tactics I will be employing after listening to Dr. Shin.
What about you, Kaimana?
I've been struggling or on this journey or I've been the bald, headed down the lane, doing bumping up and down for a while. I try to moderate my device use by time control apps and things like that. And I am not a moderator. I have learned I'm not good at moderating. I'm kind of an all or nothing type of person. So I've deleted all social media off of my phone, which means I'm not on Instagram. I haven't deleted it, but I'm just not on it because I did the 15 minutes and I would always add time. And then it would be, I remember specifically there was a day in April where my phone gave me how much, and I was on my phone for 8 hours. And for me, it was just, I could feel it physically. And I really feel for the people whose jobs like really require them to be on their phones. My job is not that job. So now, it has cut down on my desire to be on my phone. And so like Liz, I will be better at communicating what I'm doing. Because I also think if I'm not willing to share with my kids what I'm doing on my phone, if this isn't a conversation, I don't have to tell them exactly what it is, but having conversations and relating with people through my phone is people I'm relating with. So if I'm not willing to bring my kids into that world, I really should check on why I'm even doing that. So whether it's who it is, what I'm doing, and then if appropriate, maybe inviting them in to what I'm doing. So I've been working really hard on our family budget. And so I'll spend time really nerding out on that. And so when the kids come in, I say, well, why don't you come and look? So they start to understand, because like you, Liz, my kids are 7 and 9. So they're kind of old enough to start to understand, but it's still pretty abstract. So really showing them, this is this section and this is how much we spend, and being like, okay with that discussion. And it's worked in the past because if they want to like go out to eat and I'm like, well, let's look at our budget, or they're like, what's on the budget? And they can actually see it. It feels good to invite them into that part of my life, because our devices are our life. So maybe I'm kind of talking through it as I'm saying it, but inviting them in, setting boundaries. I also think it's important to make our kids wait. They're so used to just instant. So I love what Liz said, not just automatically going to, give them the attention, but making the boundaries. And I want them to know that I will also honor that when they're on a device and they say, hold on, mommy, I'm at this part in my game. How much more time do you need? I need 1 more minute. Okay, you can have 1 more minute to finish that. And then we're going to go take a bath. So
much there. Kaimana,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Number 1, co-watching, doing that, definitely in the research that is a good thing to bring them in. Number 2, I had never even thought about respecting my child enough to let them also give me I need to I'm in this level of Minecraft. I need 30 seconds to finish it. And so I love that because it wasn't on my radar. So I love that now that's on my radar. The last thing I wanted to mention is we're talking about all this conversation, all these shared expectations that we're going to work on with our children. And where it clicked for me is that is parental modeling. So we've got these 2 strategies, but by doing that, by having this open communication, by bringing the children in to the conversation of doing the budget with you, or this is how mommy plans an event, or this is how mommy keeps people safe, that we are modeling that behavior for them that gets imprinted in their brains, in their minds.
Can I share one final fun tip if all else fails? Is I don't know if you guys knew this, but you can actually turn your phone black and white. So I read this about 5 years ago. I was completing my graduate degree as well, Malika. I was getting an MBA, and I struggled with my phone as a distraction from my studies. And I had heard that there is a setting, I can't remember what it is, but anybody can Google it, but you can go in and change your phone from the color to black and white. And it genuinely limits my, that kind of, pull to always be checking it. Like it just, for whatever reason, the black and white is not as interesting as the color. So if we're really struggling to do that, go turn your phone black and white for a few days. And I mean, Instagram is just not as vivid in black and white, right?
That's a cool one. Well, I'll put that in the show notes. So I'll make sure to find that link and I'll put it in the show notes for all of you listening. Gosh, thank you so much for this conversation. It was so nice to just have some girl chat and get real and get deep. And, I feel that this was helpful for me. So I really hope that the listeners also feel the same way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Malika.
Thank you.
Oh man, that was so awesome. I hope that filled your cup. I'm like overflowing right now. We got to learn and reflect and please share what you learned. I know I will, because when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. Thank you to Jim Quick for that little lesson. If you want to stay on this learning streak, I also created a free worksheet for you to get you started with that family conversation about phubbing and creating those bumpers. Just go to malikadudley.com to sign up for my newsletter and I'll send that right over. In our next episode, episode 6, we talk about deception. Do you think you can tell when someone is lying to you? What kinds of communication tools can we use to be better lie detectors and more honest communicators? Is digital deception more or less easy to detect? We explore truth default theory with Dr. Timothy Levine, author of the book Duped, and whose work was the subject and catalyst for Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers.
There's some research that suggests that lies are actually more coherent than truths. The reason is most people aren't that consistent. People aren't little logic bots, right? But when liars, at least if it's an important prepared lie, then they try to get rid of the inconsistencies.
Intrigued yet? Keep an eye out for episode 6 for a discussion about deception in our relationships and also while using technology. One of my favorite parts was learning about butler lies. I also wanted to give a shout out to Communication Podcast listener and world champion tandem surfer Brian Killenna for his review of the podcast. My son Jackson is here to read what Brian wrote.
Chifu, this is like listening to a master martial artist of beautification of communication.
Thanks, Brian and Jackson. You can listen to this podcast anywhere you get your audio too. And on behalf of my guests and I want to thank you for listening. We hope these tips, these conversations lead to more conversations and ultimately the beautification of our communication. See you next time. Welcome to the Ohana.
Beautiful.